Hey folks, Lilith Games has been an incredible success story launching super high quality and successful mobile games like Dota Legends, aka Dot Arena, Art of Conquest, AFK Arena, and Rise of Kingdoms. Lilith recently launched a new team battle RPG game called Dislyte. This game was a fresh new take on the genre with a modern art style focused on modern culture and music, in creating collectible heroes from worldwide mythology rather than using an IP like other games in the same genre, for example, Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes or Marvel Strike Force. So, how has Dislyte achieved some level of impressive initial success, and what's behind the recent decline in revenue and downloads? And finally, what is the future outlook for the game? Well, we have two experts who recently covered Dislyte. Harshal Karvande is a lead game designer at Rovio, as well as a Naavik Pro Contributor at market research firm Naavik. We also have Teemu Palomaki, a chief games analyst at GameRefinery. And finally, I was able to convince data.ai, the leading market intelligence firm and sponsor of this podcast, to come on and break down a lot of the data behind the game. So we will also give you all the revenue, download, RPD, and other data estimates for Dislyte covered by data.ai's GM of gaming, Junde Yu. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into it. Dislyte Deconstruction coming up right now. Welcome, guys. Thanks so much for joining me. Junde, I thought we could start by just trying to look at Dislyte at the data level in terms of what the performance is looking like and things like that.
So I was kind of following your lead in this discussion where you were talking about Navik's article where they mentioned that this light has a much higher RPD in its early weeks of launch, especially in the US. So we took a look at our data, and if you see this blue line here, this is this light in its early days, and actually we took this light and their competitors or like-for-like games, and we pushed them all to the same start line. So no matter when they launch, we move them to the same start line. So it's a comparison of the first few weeks of all these games. So yes, you can see that in the US, this light does have the highest RPD amongst these other games. Okay, but also if you were to expand this from the US to look at worldwide, so now we're looking at worldwide, and actually their numbers are not top. Okay, there are some other games like Dragon Ball, Summoner's War, Raid, Shadow Legends that are higher. So we could also dig deeper to see, for the worldwide numbers, what's really causing, Dislyte to have a lower worldwide number. So if we were to look into Dislyte stats, RPD, revenue per download, and we look at across all regions everywhere in the world, we can actually see that some regions like Hong Kong, Macau, Singapore, Brunei, some of these regions, places with some parts of the population being ethnic Chinese, they do have quite high RPD. Okay, and then especially Singapore as well, you can see a very, very high average time per user. I think Singapore is also where they publish the game from. Okay, and so if they have such a high RPD in these places, why do they have a overall, when you look at worldwide, it's just around $4. So if we can scroll down to the bottom, you can see there are some um, countries here. You see like Brazil, 400K downloads. Okay, and we just look at, they have around 6 million downloads in 6.3 million downloads in total. So 400K downloads in Brazil, that's around 8%, and 8% of these players are paying a average of revenue per download is 47 cents. And similarly, Mexico here as well, also huge download numbers, but not very high ARPU or RPD. So these are some developing regions that are you can say pulling down the RPD a little bit. All right, and let's quickly also take a look at Dragon Ball and Raid. So Dragon Ball has very high ARPU in Japan, Hong Kong, and other countries, where the IP is very strong. Okay, similarly, Raid as well, very strong in parts of Europe, Scandinavia, and so on. All right. Similarly, they also have some developing countries where downloads are huge, but the like Brazil, Indonesia, downloads are huge, but the revenues are not very high. Hence, the overall RPD goes down a little bit. But not to say, I would not totally say that these developing regions do not have much revenue. There are also like third-party payment providers like CodaPay, Razer Gold, and so on that provide third-party payment gateway services over there, and also work with local e-commerce apps and so on to provide more payment outlets. Okay. Yeah, so that's
And
a
Jinda,
quick summary
are
of
those tracked?
yeah.
Like those third-party payment gateways, are they tracked or are
Um,
they off?
we're not tracking them as of yet. Yeah,
Okay.
not yet. Uh,
Okay.
but we could also okay. So since we're here, I'll just dive into a little bit since we're talking about ARPU and RPD as well. So if we were to dive into the in-app purchase, the details of the in-app purchases, we can see that the most two popular in terms of purchase volume. The packs that are bought are firstly the $99 item. Sorry, this actually the purchase volume is not huge, but because it's a lot of money, so it contributes actually to the highest revenue. And the second highest the second item that contributes to the highest revenue, that would be the $9.99 item. And lastly, I also took a look at the cross app usage, meaning users of this app, which other apps do they use? And I found, okay, so I picked out some highlights. They use a lot of Discord. I mean, 40 to 50%, 48% of them, and this is based on Indonesian data because they have a lot of players in Indonesia. Um, 48% of their players also use Discord, and also a lot of them also use Twitch, which means they are kind of hardcore players would have higher ARPU, and also they spend a lot of time playing, and not just they're also part of the community. They contribute part of the community, and they also play a lot of hardcore games like PUBG, League of Legends, and so on. And another thing I found interesting was Zoom. I would say I'm a Zoom user, so
Yeah.
I would say I work in a certain industry, and I have I mean I'm not a blue collar, so I think they also have a fair share possibly of white collars, which also
Right.
could contribute to the higher RPD.
And Jinda, can you also
Yeah.
speak on the overall revenue or overall downloads to date in terms of the timing, or is that
Worldwide,
sure? Yeah, worldwide.
and I'll
And I'll
filter out the
filter out the
competition,
competition,
right?
right? Yep. And Harshal, I know
So
that
here
you
we
when
would
oh
have.
sorry, and Harshal, I know that when you were looking at Dislyte, you decided to focus on the U.S. Was it because of the strong monetization that you saw in the U.S.?
Yeah, and also like some of the competitive games like they are available in China, for example,
Uh-huh.
and that brings in like that throws the numbers off quite a bit. So I felt like US is like a good common ground.
Right.
Lilith's own all their games, if you just look at their revenue, 50% of it comes from China and then 50% from the US. Like, it's kind of like an equal split. So I felt without launching in China,
Right.
it's probably
I see.
like a yeah.
Right. And Timo, I know you did a webinar on Dislyte. Before Jinda jumps into the numbers, anything that you would be reacting to right now as far as what you're seeing from the data?
Um, nothing that comes to mind right now.
Okay.
We focused mostly on the like game features,
Features.
so
Okay.
so
All right.
more about like what the game is actually like and how it compares to what we see
Got it.
in general.
Okay. Great. So those are the numbers, Jinda?
Yep. So these are the global numbers for downloads and revenues. So you can see downloads have come down quite a bit. Uh, I think initially they were doing quite a bit of paid campaigns. Okay,
Right.
and then for revenues, it's also come down, but it's still maintaining at around $1 million per week, and this is net revenue. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Awesome. Thanks so much,
Would you
Jinda.
like to see a country breakdown, or you're good?
Sure. Why not? Yeah. Let's see a country breakdown.
So yeah, the biggest revenue countries would be U.S., France, Hong Kong, Germany, Canada, and so on. Yeah, but
Great.
the downloads do not really follow the same trend.
Got it.
Some of
Okay.
these regions would have very high ARPU, like Hong Kong and so on.
Okay. Great. All right, thanks, Jinda. Thanks so much for sharing. It's great to see
Thank you.
like the performance from the data. And so now I thought it'd be great to kind of jump in and have you guys react to some of what you were seeing. And I know Harshal, you've kind of done you've one of the things that you highlighted in your report was just how well Dislyte has monetized in the U.S. relative to very strong IP-based games of a similar type, right? So Star Wars: Galaxy of Heroes, Marvel Strike Force, and so at least in the U.S. they seem to be outperforming those games at least through a time period or initial launch. And so, as far as like how you guys think the game, what in terms of what the game has done well to monetize in the way that we've seen from the data that Jinda presented, how have they done so well, and especially without the top performing games in the genre, which are supported by strong IP. And maybe Harshal, you want to start?
Yeah, so Dislyte comes from Lilith Games,
Mhm.
and they have a really strong foundation with AFK Arena, like leading the charge in the Hero Collector RPG space. So I almost see it as a studio. It is very tough in the current market, and it's always been tough in the free to play game space that a studio who is really good at a genre is able to, make a game that is bigger than their previous, big hit. So it is something that the studio kind of like, if you have AFK Arena performing so well out in the market in the RPG space, what do you create that is able to then perform better and compete with Raid and Summoner's War and all of those games which are kind of beating AFK Arena? And I think in that sense they kind of succeeded. It's still too early and too young. The game is not even half a year life, so it is quite early to talk about things. But with the early numbers, right out of the gates, making something which is more successful than their previous attempt into the RPG space. You kind of go back to, okay, what did Lilith do with AFK Arena that AFK Arena blew out of the gates as a successful game, and they made this kind of niche genre a lot more accessible. With the idle mechanics, they made it like a little broader appealing, and it Dislyte is like a next step in that how can we still make it more accessible without losing like having some like lower LTV or losing some monetization aspects. So having a very deep game, but still continuing the trend of making it more accessible. And you can see that from the decision making of just the kind of pop aesthetic.
Right.
The hero RPG games have always looked better and better. These heroes need to look very collectible because they are the kind of primary monetization driver, and yet still maintain all the deep systems for their audience. So I think that's what I feel like they have done with this game, that they're able to learn from their kind of RPG roots and make a game that can then compete with the others, and
Right.
have be a stronger bet than their previous big hit.
Right. And great. And so like some of that stuff in terms of, so I take it you meaning like with the like the pop music and the art style being more culturally modern and relevant, that you think that's what's helping it become more approachable, as you're calling it. Is that right?
Yeah, so I think with those, the game makes a fantastic first
Mhm.
impression. That when you see it, you feel the energy, and it looks very modern, and you might want to give it a try from the visuals and the look and the aesthetic. But then if you step deeper, the RPG games are all about progression, and their main motivation is power, and it's a power fantasy. Can you get stronger? And even from that perspective, Dislyte having this pillar of godlike power.
Right.
Like we all have grown up with different narratives in mythology, and basing that as the basis of, like, your heroes are godlike beings, yet they are very human because they have there are human characters that get these godlike powers. So you have the collectible nature of like waifu and husbando games. So you have a very attractive motorcycle enthusiast, and she gets Odin's powers. So how do you mix those two? Or there's a podcaster named Helena,
Right.
and she gets the Helen of Troy's powers, and it makes it like really stand out in a very unique way, and yet make it very accessible and drive to the core of power growth and godlike growth. So after the first impression, the game systems do a really good job of nudging players into what do you need to do. Everything is available in game. Right now, Junde was showing us how Discord seems to be a common app used because Dislyte integrates really well
Mhm.
with Discord through the app. But the app itself has so many ways that it nudges players on what kind of squads they should use, what kind of upgrades they should use. There's a lot of community feedback in the UX and UI that tells you what other players have decided and how players are kind of improving the chances of victory by using what kind of squad. So the game kind of brings all that information one step closer and in a very digestible way. It's not filled with a lot of over information, but it nudges the players in the right way that, hey, if you are, for example, having difficulties with battles, nudge and see what other players are doing. And the beauty of that is it's an organic system. So as they continue to add more features and more heroes into the game, it'll always remain relevant. They have a Reddit style weighted comment system in the game. So if players find a comment useful and if you're having trouble, those comments are weighted upward.
Sure.
And it's really fantastic. They build a whole social system in the world, in the game and the app itself, that nudges players. So if you're new to hero collector RPGs, there are a lot of progress vectors, there are a lot of battle modes that you need to get accustomed to. But Dislyte does a really good job of nudging players in the right way and getting access to those.
Right. And Teemu, what do you think in terms of the monetization?
Well, the monetization is well. First, continuing thought from that. Like, I remember when I started playing Dislyte, and when I opened it and started playing it, I said to my coworker Alti, who we did the webinar with, we were I just had to say to him that these characters, they have so many different skills, and like everyone seems to have their unique status effect that they put on the enemies, and I'm having hard time following this, and I play these games for living. But then those kind of guides that you mentioned, that that you can see how players have used them and what kind of comments they've given for the characters, those really helped me to kind of see which character or which things to focus on characters, and those can really help for new players. And like the first impression was really good. Like when I saw the game, when I saw it first time, I'm like, you have these music theme, you have these street fashion clothes, you have these gods mixed in all this, and what is this game? So it really piques your interest, and it can really get you in. And then when you get in the game, going to the monetization, I think Lilith Games is really good at monetization. They really get you into the game. You start getting really excited for it. It's easy to start progressing, and you have a variety of ways to spend. Say, I think the gachas might be a little bit, kind of more whale focused. At least that's how it felt as a player. That when you start. When you want to get characters, you only have the one option where to get them. Sure, you can farm certain characters, which is really nice feature. I really like that, and it's possible to get the Gabriel, one of the top tier characters. You can get that by farming, and that is really nice. It makes you feel like, okay, this game really welcomes me. But then when you want to widen your roster, you pretty much have that one place to go, and you have no options. There are rarely like the limited gachas that give improved chances to get characters. So it gets really expensive quickly if you're not paying attention, and when you're having fun, you're not really paying attention. So I think they're really good at that. And then the stamina system. That's something that what I was constantly hitting, like, oh, I want to play more, but I'm out of stamina. Oh, I need to, well, I can spend small amount of gems to do that, but then also like, well, it's not that expensive to buy it, and I'm having good time here. So you have kind of the low spender option, and you have the high spender option, and those make you feel like you get good stuff out of them.
Yeah, and Jinda, I know you're primarily oriented around the data, but did you have a chance to kind of play and have your perceptions as a player?
Yeah, I did. Just a little bit. So I think I play a few games,
Mhm.
like a few, like 2 or 3 games. So I'm not a heavy gamer. I don't really get paid to play games for the whole day. I wish that there would be true play to earn. So okay, but I did try it. So you can consider me a mid-casual, mid-core player. Okay, so I think two things that stood out. I think I played it around 5 times. Stood out for me just casual observations. First, it's one of those very few games, very rare games that actually asked me to put on headphones
Okay.
to experience it, and I did, and it was wow, it was surreal. It was something different. No game ever asked me to do that. The other thing was I'm a busy person, or maybe I'm just a person with short attention span. Whenever I see stories, animation, I skip. So I skip, and then they give me a summary. Wow, that was a very cool. I thought that was a very cool small innovation. I could skip all watching 2 minutes of animation, but I can still get the gist of what's going on and still follow the story. And I think Harshal mentioned the narratives. I think that's to be bought into the story. That's one reason for you to want to pay for exceptional characters or skins.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this game took a number of, well, maybe not calling it risks, but the key differentiation between if you were to look at the existing players in the market that have the biggest success, Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes, Marvel Strike Force, although Raid to a lesser degree, but we're talking about the music, right? How many people with mobile phones have headphones on or listen or don't just turn sound on or off? I don't know. Maybe that's changed the narrative, although they provide you the option to turn it on or off, just the art style and how relevant, culturally relevant and modern it is. And then four, no IP. Now there's also Raid, which is original IP, but if you're like a game exec, you typically be thinking, should we get an IP or not? So I like the originality, and I like, to your point, Jinda, about all the little small innovations that they kind of integrated into the game. But when you guys think about IP, like how did you guys also think that was a big risk? I mean, there is also Raid out there, but how did you guys think about, well, maybe any of those risks, whether it's the music, the narrative, the not having an IP. If you were to think about that, I mean, I guess in retrospect, we're seeing it's still doing okay. Although, Jindet, to your point, like things are starting to come down. One of the things that Marvel Strike Force and Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes can count on is continued organic downloads based upon the IP and things like that. But do you guys have any other thoughts in terms of some of those key points of differentiation?
Yeah, I can go first on this. So the whole idea of Farlight Games, which is a kind of branch of Lilith Games, their CEO spoke about their goal of global localization is the term that they're kind of internally using. And though the game is not launched in China, so this is a problem in the way that the game can actually be advertised differently in China compared to the rest of the world. Like if you look at the UA for the game currently, they're using heroes like Loki, who kind of looks like his Marvel counterpart with the long horns, and heroes that could kind of appeal more to the Western players. But I can see how well, because there is a like one of the mythologies that they use is Chinese, and there are a lot of Chinese heroes and iconography in the game. They would be able to kind of broaden, this kind of divide between Western and Eastern players, and really kind of customize their message by getting players across the board. And one example that always comes to my mind is the breadth of expansion that Empires and Puzzles managed. If you think about that game, it is fantasy, but it is fantasy in such a broad aspect that it is fantasy like Lord of the Rings, it is fantasy like Harry Potter, it is fantasy like Game of Thrones. And having that kind of breadth really helps, scale games up very effectively. And if you comp that to, the next game that Small Giant did, which was Puzzle Combat, it was so much narrow in, this military aesthetic that they had going. It did not scale to the scale of which, you have Empires and Puzzles. As you learn a lot from a game that is live and being so successful. If you have the same systems, can you make a bigger game by having, a less wider theme. So I feel Dislyte is kind of managing that with their the mythological worldwide penetration of those stories and heroes.
Teemu and Junde, any thoughts? Oh,
Well,
go ahead, please.
yeah, well, the game doesn't have an IP, but like just mentioned, it has these
Right.
gods. So in a way, it has this kind of universal IP. You have gods from China, you have gods from Nordics, you have gods from Egypt, and all these. So there are things that people feel familiar to, even if they are taken to they take a different twist. So in that sense, it's kind of using a soft
Right.
IP, so to speak, that can help. And one thing it also does, like it has really wide net for players, especially these days. It's hard to find that specific narrow niche audience because the kind of targeting the advertising is getting more difficult. But
Mm.
like what Dislyte does is it's really diverse in its characters. You have variety of skin colors. You have men and women. You have different sizes or body shapes. You have old. You have young. You have living. You have undead. You have these human characters. Then you have these furry animal characters, and it just appeals to a wide audience. And in my bubble, I'm really into like drawing stuff. I studied like game graphics before I joined GameRefinery, but like I really like looking into like what kind of fan arts are made out of games, of different mobile games, because I enjoy looking at them. And when looking at like what kind of fan art is available on Dislyte, it's a lot of focused on the furry characters, the animal themed characters, because that kind of those people are really into drawing fan art, and then they kind of share about the game with their friends. And then there was a lot of these hot young boys as well. So those are really also popular among fan artists. So that gives to some extent some like organic visibility just by characters existing in the game. And in my small social media bubble, there were these posts about like players comparing Genshin Impact skin tones to what they have in Dislyte or what they have in Cookie Run Kingdom, and they were really, for those people who that matters a lot. They really make the word go around that here is a game that is really inclusive, and you can find something that you feel really related to.
Yeah, I thought you might have made a couple of good points there, Timu, especially like by using gods. I mean, that saves so much time in terms of character design as well, right? It's because it's like you just need to riff on it. You don't have to come up with original concepts, things like that. By using gods of different countries, you also have like set collection categories and things like that. But and to your point, I thought the other interesting aspect of what you had talked about is if you are making an art style that is modern and relevant for then you're basically creating an opportunity for fans to then virally promote through riffs and things of that nature. So that's super interesting as well. Junde, any thoughts, or should I move on to a point actually that you made in the data that I'd love to like hear your thoughts on?
I think these guys have already got great points, detailed points. It just because I came across a quote from the CEO. I think it's from some time back. He was referencing one of the earliest titles, Dot Arena, several years back, and he was talking about the success and failure of that. I mean, success because it was huge, and then failure because it faced all kinds of
Yep.
suits and stuff, and they had to pull it down and then change the name and so on. He said that he couldn't believe that the game's success had so much to do with the IP, and because of that, he resolved, and his company resolved to double down on creativity, on innovations, and to hopefully eventually create their own IP.
Right.
So that was, I think, one of the driving motivations from that big
Okay.
lesson.
And maybe we could actually, that's a super interesting backstory. I mean, I think Junde, you know some of the backstory of my influence on Fun Plus and things like that with Dota Legends, the original name. But yeah, like in terms of Lilith itself, like how much are you guys familiar with them in terms of like the type of studio they are? What do you guys know, if anything, about Lilith, the studio, and kind of their history and what that history may have given them to be able to produce a game like Dislyte?
Okay, so they've come a long way since a lot of other hits like Rise of Kingdoms and AFK Arena and so on. And I think one thing that we've known about them is that they have an exceptional, strong publishing team, and they're very good at localization. I think Harshal mentioned that as well. What they do is, I think they sometimes employ quite creative ways for marketing and UA, and they don't just believe in taking successful high ARPU games in China and then just localizing the language everywhere. They believe, and I think Harshal mentioned the word global localization, and that's what they put a lot of focus and time on to maximize the ARPU in every country. Yeah. And also they launched a new publishing brand, Farlight, in Singapore, and I think this, because Singapore has a base to push for international expansion, that's also an increasing trend.
So actually, there seems like,
not to mention they're close to Google and Facebook here as
yeah,
well.
so it seems like there's some historical context to what you were talking about, Jinda, when you said, like during the kind of Dota
Yeah,
Legends.
the other historical context is
they learned the lesson that
Right.
they should own their own IP. But even going back, like they actually had a lot of difficulties working with their Chinese publisher, and there was a whole. I don't know if you, because the original game that came to the US, their publisher actually kind of ripped their code and did whatever. So now from that lesson, they're
Right,
like,
and there was
okay, we
the
need to publish our
Youku,
own
yeah.
games because we got hosts. So it seems like they're kind of learning from a series of painful
Right.
lessons, and based on those lessons, they're pivoting to build their own internal capability.
Right. Yeah, and the other thing was, I think they were one of the earlier ones to realize, okay, in China, it's going to be dominated by a lot of Tencent, Alibaba, NetEase, and so on. And if you don't have the means to distribute, it will be very expensive to do this in China. So they were one of those earlier ones to try to go for international users and revenue.
And I believe the original team came from Tencent. I think they were like 4 years at Tencent and they kind of jumped. But yeah, I have met the CEO before. I was very impressed when I first met him. The first time I played, Dota Legends, I was stunned. So they definitely have come a long way since that time, but definitely very impressive. One of the few studios really cranking out like hit. So super impressive on that. And Harshal and Teemu, I don't know if you have any other thoughts in terms of Lilith, the company and organization, but if you do, love to hear any of your thoughts.
So I've been having this really strong feeling that the Chinese devs are taking over the
For sure.
world. It is absolutely impressive what they are able to accomplish um, at a technical scale which is unprecedented. Like Genshin Impact running that well on day zero on devices all over the world, on platforms all over the world, was absolute insanity. And Blizzard's Diablo also runs so well on mobile devices, and Dislyte and Lilith Games, they run so well. I was just thinking about, for example, the server tech for these games. In Dislyte, when you have a server error, the action still gets completed. It kind of there's a screen which comes up like there's a server connection error, and you say okay, and the action still gets completed. I have never ever felt this in a free to play mobile game, that when there is a server disconnect, the action usually is cancelled, and players usually have to then do the action again. So I feel there's a lot of little nuances that this company is absolutely excellent at. And one of the things I wanted to mention earlier, maybe now's a good time, is with the energy system. So you need stamina to partake in battles, and there has been a trend in hero collector RPGs that stamina only gets consumed if you are successful in battle. So if you lose a battle, they kind of give you 90% of the stamina back. So any energy that gets spent in a game is, positive for progression, which is very different. Like I work in puzzle games, so usually you lose energy when you lose level. So it's like absolutely the opposite of that. And then if you think of the merge genre, that's a very positive progression genre. Like energy only gets spent if you progress. You have more items on the game board. So one thing I wanted to talk about the battle system was they have this absolutely incredible minimization mechanic that if you get into grinding some levels, or you want some resources, you can start grinding and then you can minimize the battle in real time, and then you can just move on to another boss battle. And if you think about it from a player experience perspective, it is doubly rewarding. It's almost like playing Dislyte on two different devices at the same time, and then gaining the gained progression together. So I would expect a lot more hero collector RPGs implement this parallel battle system, that while your heroes are out battling and grinding, farming resources, the players can then spend their active time in either getting more heroes, upgrading them, or investing in, like, the harder battles which need them to actively interact in the battle. So again, it goes back to the tech, that it's so seamless that when you're using the app, you can minimize the battles, and with a tap you can maximize it back, and the heroes are battling with all their animations, and it's like zero load
Right.
times between
And
those.
Teemu, maybe like as Harshal mentioned, the stamina system, and maybe we can come back if you want to highlight any other important points of differentiation. But when you do compare the genre against the other games, Galaxy of Heroes, Strike Force, Raid, any of these other games, Dragon Ball, do you guys see any other key differences? Or Teemu, would you call out any specific differentiation as far as whether it's the implementation of the gacha or anything else from a feature perspective?
Well, most of those games are analyzed by other analysts at GameRefinery. So I mostly have Japanese RPGs. Okay. So I can't go into details because of that, but overall, like Dislyte has very, very solid very solid feature set. It has it ticks all the boxes. It has the same mechanics that successful games have, but it really does exceptional job at some of things where it goes a little bit further. Just like Harshal mentioned, like the way you can grind twice at the same time, like leave the game grinding and then go grind yourself. Another thing that is really something that I love. I've seen it in a couple of Japanese games before. It's wonderful system. In one, I think it was Playdex Lord that I played in Japan. I could put that game to grind like for a whole night, and then come back and be like, yes, I had good progress here, and it was fun to progress in that game. But that system makes playing Dislyte much easier, because it is a very grindy game. And then when you're grinding twice at the same time, or you're grinding auto grinding and playing yourself, you're spending double the stamina. So I suppose that's good for monetization. Like that's why I constantly ran out of stamina and ended up purchasing more.
Okay, great. Well, maybe like we kind of left at a cliffhanger when Jinda showed us the data, right? So there was like the big spike and it was kind of coming down. But, in terms of based on what you guys know from a features perspective, from the data that we've seen, what would you expect the longer term outlook for Dislyte? Like, how do you think it will ultimately do relative to the other leading game titles, which I've already mentioned, revenue, like whether it's downloads or revenue life of product? What do you guys think? How well will it do? And maybe you can even highlight what would be the biggest risks to the game. Maybe starting with you, Harshal.
Yeah. So one red flag for me is the game has actively avoided a lot of conflict, by which I mean like player versus player conflict that drives like the whole power fantasy, comes to the highlight when it's beating others, right? Becoming global number one, country number one, becoming the best. And it felt odd to me that Dislyte, almost all of its social features are more collaborative, comparative, help each other, and there isn't a lot of space in the game for conflict or comparison in the way that you want to get better than other players. It's mostly been that you can take ideas of other players and helps you progress, or share their characters and that'll help you progress. And even the clan system, it has this activeness meter, so as long as you're active in your own way, your clan will kind of progress towards rewards. So I do feel that as a red flag, primarily because I feel competition systems drive like long term engagement and monetization. Players kind of, if they want to be first and top of the leaderboards for this month and every month, get all the characters, max them out, that really drives a certain subset of really, really valuable players. Um, so I do expect that the game would add them as we go forward. But with the amount of time and energy that has gone into all the other supporting systems, right now the game is very PvE centric. That makes it also very friendly, that you're getting all the help from other players and you're getting nudged into how the games work. But I would see it evolve into more, where are the clan versus clan systems, for example. The game has a real time battle system, so you can actually battle other players in real time, but it's relegated almost to a isn't this fun to try out system. It has no rewards to it and you can just have fun with it. So I would expect them to kind of lean on those systems more. And it really did surprise me that in the long term, the ability to have different squads to be used in PvP, so that you reign on the PvP leaderboards, is the kind of supercharging factor. Like, yes, you have your events, you have your heroes, but the overall layer is social, which keeps players long term and the monetization really supercharged. So that is a red flag. I'm not sure how much is that intended decision, that they would want to make a game more accessible and hence avoid PvP as much as possible. But if you compare to the other games, they do have way more robust global leaderboards and this kind of social comparison that drives players to, do better and really, really increase their engagement and
Right. And
just
Harshal,
long-term LTV of the
I know in
product.
the old days, I'm a little bit dated from working on this specific type of game, but there used to be certain perspectives in terms of a game should only be PvE, or a game should only be PvP, or it should be PvE then shift to PvP. Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you think they could pull off in today's day and age? You can be kind of a healthy mix of both PvE and PvP. And certainly, I think like you did see a little bit more of that mixing in some of the 4X games where it's kind of started off all PvP. Then they started adding like PvE elements and in some shooter games like Tarkov. You have like NPCs and things like that as well. But like, do you have any thoughts on the mixing of those modes?
Yeah. Well, in the RPG space itself, you can see that like the base building of empires and puzzles and the story and campaign mode sits very comfortably alongside the alliance and the
Okay.
alliance wars and those systems. So unless somebody's making a game which is central PvP, like maybe Clash Royale is a good example. Like every battle in that game, even
Right.
though if you want to just progress through the different uh, arenas, it every battle is still a PvP battle. Um, I do think that there is enough space. If the question is, do they need to pick a
You're
lane?
saying you can
I would
mix,
still,
and
I would be more
we're seeing
comfortable
more
picking.
examples of that, right?
Yeah,
Or at least sprinkled in, right? So, yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, broadly, is there a successful free-to-play mobile game without competition? Or without social comparison? And I feel like it's very
Well,
hard to argue for games that have been.
I will say this: there are some games that are very successful that people think are PvP games that aren't. But well, we can leave that for a topic for another discussion. But okay, Teemu, same question. Long-term outlook for Dislyte.
Well, it's going to need a lot of I think more variety to be successful. Right now, like I've been playing it a lot, so it's been just the same kind of grinding the same material, same equipment. The equipment system is getting kind of tedious. I have like, was it 2,000 or something to sort through and see which ones are relevant. You have like there are games that have that kind of system, that you have these relics that you assign to the character that give stats, and stats are randomized. But I think they made it a little bit more complex than what I've seen, for example, in Cookie Run Kingdom or well, some other games. So you have variety of these different items that have different stat things. Then you have like for 4 different slots for those, and then you have randomized stats. And for some characters it is relevant to have like a strength focused equipment. For some it's speed focused, and so you kind of want to keep them all just in case you get that good character that actually needs it, but you don't know which one. So there's a lot of, like, recently when I started, I felt like this game is great. It's a lot of fun. It's something new. But the more I played it, it's like, this is very grindy. This is kind of tedious. I have to leave the device open. I can't do anything else with the device. Sure, I can grind 2 things in the same game, but like, I think it needs more variety, be it the PvP or be it some different kind of PvE elements. Like AFK Arena has surprised me in the past. It has diversified its game. It has match 3 mode for some reason. It has dice game events. It has like card game type of events, and so I expect to see like diversity like that. But like when they add new characters that are featured in the main gacha, the events that come with those are really nice and really fun to play. And the Zora event had like the events unique progression system that you unlock nodes and you get stat boosts for just that event. And I think that was kind of exciting and different. So yeah, I expect more different things in order for it to be successful.
Okay. And Junde, what about you? Like the data that we saw from you was a little bit grim.
I think, okay, firstly, let me address PvP first. So I think PvP is definitely fun, and it makes sense as a game mode, and it makes everything a lot more engaging. I think it makes sense where, especially where skill makes a difference. Like how do I play this first, or that, like, do I buff up the whole team first, or do I attack this one person focus attack, or attack all 3 enemies at once? These things, sometimes skill can override the attributes of your characters, and that's where players with stronger skills could overcome other players. So, and the other things like unique characters, unique skins, helps some players who want to show off, look better. So this has the ingredients of engage. This game has the ingredients for being to have an engaging PvP game mode. So again, if I look at the data, so I think this game has only been out of soft launch for, say, 2 to 3 months. And I look at their paid downloads data, their paid UA, it's down to a trickle, let's say just 30,000 worldwide every week. This doesn't look like, for a game that has such high ARPU and owned by Lilith with such huge budgets, this does not seem like end of story at all. I think they're just waiting to push push the PvP into the mainstream, to the main gameplay. But I think they're probably tuning some stuff here and there as well, because to push PvP, you need tons of players online at the same time, especially if you're doing
that's a good point.
synchronous play. It's a terrible experience if you just search for a game and you wait 10 minutes and there's nothing. People don't come back. Some of the very huge games on day one, either they have lots of players or they put lots of bots to make it look like, oh, instant connection, instant multiplayer.
Building the machine learning based bots takes a while with a lot of investment. Like the kind of more the scripted AI is a little more straightforward. So maybe I could ask you guys one last question. I'll just open it up for anyone if anyone has any thoughts. But basically, what would you guys expect to see from Dislyte in the future, or maybe even from Lilith in the future? Any thoughts on that? And this will be the last question.
Well, one thing about Dislyte, like we talked about the kind of social systems integration, or almost like a social media platform integration into the app itself. I just wanted to say that, these characters and their collectible nature leads to this, there's a subculture of waifu and husbandos, and people have actually gotten married to these fictional characters, and it's quite insane. But the internet is as internet does, and when they pull the internet into the game, most of the kind of help sections are also just filled with like thirst tweets for each and every single character across the game. And it's 1 degree, 1 degree of separation less, right? It's right in the app. You can go to different forums, and there are places in the internet that you can find these, but now it's like right in the app. So I do feel like I can see the potential for the game in the way it is. From Lilith, I would wonder that, are there any other genres in which, not being in top 10 is not good enough? Like they have to be in the top 5, because Dislyte seems to be a move on that. Like AFK Arena is massively successful in the genre that it competes in. For them to say that, hey, we can do better, I would worry about, the other genres that they're in, and I would expect them to, kind of double down on those. Like, I guess Rise of Kingdoms is number 1, so I don't know how where do you go from there. But they have some other genres which, they're not in top 5, and probably they would kind of double dip on that genre mastery and learning that we have something that we learn from. It is successful, but not the successful scale that we think we have potential to bring it to. So I would expect them to kind of double dip on those genres.
Yeah, and Junde, you had mentioned that they did start Farlight Publishing, so we probably should have an expectation of additional title output, things like that. And in addition, your comment on maybe the PvP focus will come once they accumulate enough users, then they'll potentially have a stronger emphasis on PvP. But all right, any other thoughts, guys, or should we call it a wrap?
You mentioned, things I may expect from them or hope to see from them. This is a long shot.
Yeah.
But me, I've been in blockchain since for a while, and I've been involved in GameFi. I would love to see when they become big. Harshal mentioned collectibles. They could turn some of their characters into NFTs, and introduce some GameFi elements, especially since Farlight's based in Singapore. It's a hotbed of blockchain activity. So that would be a very interesting thing for me personally.
Okay, so a Farlight character collection, Farlight board club, yacht club, something like that.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for your time. And for our audience, we will catch you later. Bye. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
Nice meeting you.